the shooting range. In this episode, the Wildcat, aka the return of
Leroy Dragons!
No, not him. The return of Leroy Grumman. We take a look at the new tank map, the American desert, Hotline. The developers answer questions that you've left in the comments. But first, let's start with a new and long-awaited Soviet tank. This tank is a top MBT in the Soviet tech tree. But is it that top on the battlefield? Let's find out. How is it different from, say, the T-64B? The answer is simple. Speed. A lot of speed. The T-80B is 2.5 tons heavier and 400 horsepower more powerful. And despite its new weight, these additional horses sometimes make you think that you're driving a medium tank. In the fight, you'll spot the difference in literally seconds, and it's huge. The tank gains speed almost twice as quickly as the T-64B, and turns like a whirligig. But you can't whirl the opponent to death, can you? Eventually you'll have to shoot. Now, as for the ammo, it is, unlike the speed, absolutely the same as on the T-64B. Two types of APFSDS shells, HEATFS1s, HE1s, and an ATGM. You can destroy the enemy with virtually any of these, and yes, we tried before saying that. But let's stop on just two of them. The ATGM and the top APFSDS shell. The first one is quite basic for the BR 10.0. You won't surprise anyone with that. It's fast and it's deadly. Everything you need and nothing else. Now, as for the armor-piercing shell, it's something else. It can pierce more than 450 millimeters from 500 meters, which right now is only behind the Japanese Type 90 and the French AMX 40. But forget the numbers. Just test it and see for yourself. This shell can pierce anybody. Yes, including the new reinforced Abrams. Though when it comes to its own protection, the T-80 proves to be an easy target. Look at the X-ray of the armor. Yes, there is composite armor above the upper glacis plate, but around the driver's head and optics, it's not very composite, is it? Just a 60mm plate covered by another 30mm one. One should really refrain from trying to pierce it. Well, at least the turret can hold a punch. The only way to go through it is to fire into the gun mantlet, and that means that the crew will survive this shot. A small piece of advice before we go to tactics. Don't even think of angling on this one. Really. Do not even try. You'll see your hangar walls right after the first shot in your front track wheel. As for the promised tactics in RB, you're free to challenge the opponents for a tank race, as your speed is once again amazing. You're the one to quickly capture points and appear in places you're least expected. It's not like you'll be ambushing the enemies, but you'll still be very annoying to them. So use your strengths and be vigilant. As for the arcade mode, well, it's all the same, only the speeds are even higher. And now, let's continue the story of the King of American Naval Aviation, Leroy Grumman. It took Leroy Grumman only a couple of years to grow from a small outsourced company director to the main supplier of fighter aircraft for all the US Navy. He overthrew the giants like Curtiss and Boeing companies, and apparently got a bit too pleased with himself. The Navy ordered a new fighter to replace his own F-3F, and he started creating a new biplane, the F-4F. He had completely forgotten that the ground-based aviation had already switched to monoplanes, and it was time to use the same ideas on the sea. Now, he had a competitor, the F-2A Buffalo made by Brewster, another small outsourcing company. The aircraft wasn't perfect, but it was a monoplane, which gave it advantage over the F-4F. In panic, Grumman's engineers were trying to remake their biplane into a monoplane, but they couldn't catch up with the Buffalo. Unlike many others, Grumman didn't let the situation distress him. Having lost the competition, he nevertheless took a valuable lesson from it. A sort of an arrogance and pride vaccination. Also, the monoplane called the XF-4F2 did lose the competition, but wasn't awful. The military got interested and recommended keeping up the work on it, but the next aircraft they saw from Leroy Grumman wasn't a remake of a biplane. It was a completely standalone machine, where the only thing that probably wasn't made from scratch was the chassis. This fighter was called the Wildcat, and it also promised to be as cheap and technological as possible, which was crucial for post-Great Depression American Navy. The Wildcat wasn't the best tactical one-engine fighter in the world. It had a ton of unresolvable problems, and the Navy pilots couldn't stop cussing it out, but it still was the best naval fighter on the planet. Nobody, not the Commission, nor its creators, could imagine that its advantages would keep it in service from the first day of the war till the last one. In 1939, the Wildcats found their home on British aircraft carriers, after being renamed as the Martlets. They were also the first to get under the strike of the Japanese forces and cover the US bombers at the Battle of Midway. After that, the Wildcats were to be replaced by the modern Hellcats and Corsairs, but these turned out to be too heavy to be stationed on the little aircraft carriers that were guarding thousands of miles of communications. Hence, the Wildcats were used there as well. They were also the ones to accompany the Arctic convoys going to Murmansk. Of course, the Nazi tactical fighters didn't fly that far north, but their bombers, scouts, and torpedo bombers became a delicious prey for the Wildcats. Hell, even some submarines got what they deserved from the 4 and later 6 heavy-caliber machine guns of these fighters. The last victim of the Wildcat was a Japanese bomber, the P-1Y Ginja. It was grounded on the 5th of August 1945. By the time Leroy Grumman created a whole family of Cat naval fighters and was dreaming of creating his first jet, but he never forgot the main lesson of his career. Never let pride and ignorance blind you to reality. A distant train whistle, a couple of shrunken bushes, hot sand, and flat roads. What else do you need to be happy? That's right, fierce tank fights. The new tank map turned out to be quite small, but very versatile. We'll split it into 4 zones. The first one consists mostly of the small houses near Charlie. The terrain here is mostly flat, but you can find some cover behind these 1 or 2 story buildings. They won't protect you from the enemy fire, but will help you stay hidden for a while. In this part of town, you need to be very cautious. You can catch a stray shot from almost any corner. The second zone contains the yards near Bravo and some little grassy areas. You can't orchestrate a full-blown flank attack through these, but they will be quite useful if you want to stay unspotted a bit longer. But you can't flank the opponent completely unnoticed here. The central roads are too wide, and nobody would miss a moving tank on these. Still, remember to peek at your flanks and behind you in case your teammates do let somebody sneak up on you. The third zone is around the rocks near the respawn points. They can either help you or get you in trouble. On the one hand, you can use them to almost safely drive to the town part of the map. On the other, If the enemy gets to your rocks, he'll unleash hell on you without being noticed until it's too late. The last zone is the train station territory. At first, it looks quite open, but in reality, the only dangerous spot here is the railway itself. You can cross it and fight downstairs, or stay up there and use some houses nearby for cover. Overall, the map is quite balanced. If you start upstairs, you can easily get Alpha and safely go to the town, though you'll get sweaty around Charlie. And if you go from downstairs, you'll quickly get most of the town and Charlie, and probably even Bravo, but Alpha will be tough for you. Get ready for the traditional last part of our show, Hotline, developers answering questions from the comments. The first question comes from a user called Lucas Boulanger. War Thunder is about vehicle that existed at least in one built prototype. So technically, if I created a plane, build it, and attached a bunch of cannons to it, it could be in the game, couldn't it? Hi Lucas, in theory that's correct. But it's gonna be a long time before we reach the 21st century aircraft. Then, there's another question coming from Pulks, and in capitalized letters as well. Just call it the Leopard 1A6. Well, we're not gonna, because that would be, wrong. Soviet Truck asks, is German helicopters a possibility for the future? Hopefully East and West German? Hi there. Actually, we've just announced the arrival of the German helicopters on our site, so go check them out. And the last, very serious message is from Anselmo Frango. Just noticed that there are more planes in the sea than ships in the sky. Am I right? Surprisingly, you're absolutely correct. Well, that's it for today, but feel free to write your questions in the comments below. We do read them all, and you might see some of them answered in the next episode. And if you like what we're doing, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you on the shooting range.